I came across something this morning in my reading that I haven't been able to get out of my mind. I don't think you will be able to get it out of your mind either. I was reading some ancient history, and this saying, excuse my pronunciation, it's Polemos, Pater, Panton. 3 words. Polemos, Pater, Panton. It means war is the father of all. Now you could also interpret that word war as competition, adversity, stress is the father of all. Will Durant, the great historian, speaking of this saying by Heraclitus, as the one who actually said that, by the way, says war or competition is the father of all things, the potent source of ideas, inventions, institutions, and states. Peace is an unstable equilibrium. You and I grew up, I can't speak completely for you, but I can speak for myself and say that I grew up with this understanding that the world was worse off with war, that you wanted to avoid stress. You wanted to avoid conflict, right? That's kind of the zeitgeist, the spirit of the world we live in now. That's the meme of our culture. But let me read something to you here. I was reading Jeff Bezos, or about Jeff Bezos, the biography about him and how he built Amazon.com and made $38 billion. And one of his co-workers, a guy named Dalzell, said, Jeff Bezos does a couple of things better than anyone I've ever worked for. Number one, he embraces the truth. A lot of people talk about the truth, but they don't engage their decision making around the best truth at the time. Number two, about Jeff Bezos. The second thing is that he is not tethered by conventional thinking. What is amazing to me is that he is bound only by the laws of physics. He can't change those. Everything else he views as open to discussion. I love that mentality. Truth seeker, whether it hurts, whether it pushes the bounds of conventional thinking, physics can't be argued, I guess, and even maybe physics can be argued. But is it true that war is bad? That conflict is bad? That battles are bad? That strife and arguments and even divorce and even people stopping talking to each other and families breaking up, is that bad? Well, I think the word bad is the beginning of the problem. That is a 500-year-old ancient, archaic, outdated way of thinking of life. What Heraclitus and Durant were saying here is peace is an unstable equilibrium. Now, let me just clarify. I'm not speaking per se about war, like World War II or the Vietnam War. That's a political conversation. I don't like to have political conversations. I find them too controversial. So I want to talk about conflict as it pertains to your life. You might have heard I did a podcast or a show once on iron sharpening iron. There's another ancient saying. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens another friend. But I want to just put, I'm like, after I read this morning, I'm like, I'm putting everything, I'm flipping everything around. I'm turning my life around in terms of my values here. I'm doing a mental game with myself today. Being like, is this true? Let's argue ad absurdum. That's a logical tool that you use to prove the validity or the invalidity of a point. So you and I probably grew up, move away from pain, right? That's classic Freudian understanding. Civilization is discontents, chapter 2. Humans move towards reward, move away from pain. It wasn't Tony Robbins who came up with that pain. It was Freud, right? So what, though, is in our best interest? Not the organisms, the DNA that's within us. For you, is it better for you to move forward towards conflict or move away from it? Because according to Durant, and he's a pretty smart guy, a couple Pulitzer Prizes under his belt, and I think maybe the wisest person to have ever lived, he says competition, selection, it's the father of all things. Polemos, pater, panton, the potent source of ideas, inventions, institutions, and states. Peace is an unstable equilibrium. You know, it's very interesting. If you study some of the modern, some of the cutting edge guys like Steve Jobs, or in this case, Jeff Bezos, they were both adopted. Interesting point. There's something possibly, and this is just a hypothesis, if this saying is true, this ancient saying, that conflict and war is the father of all things that we call humanity and civilization, whether it be new ideas, new inventions, new concepts, then friction can be something that moves you towards an end goal that you want. All of us perceive friction in our lives. Someone mad at us, someone yelling at us, getting fired from a job. I was reading this Brian Acton. He's one of the founders of WhatsApp. And if you read, Google it, you read this, he got fired from, I think it was either Facebook or Google or Twitter. He's just a programmer sitting in front of a computer writing some code for probably 50 grand a year, 70 grand a year. And he tweeted after he got fired, he was like, let's see what comes up next in my life. And he met his business partner. They launched this texting app. I use it all the time. It's a great one. Business communication. I talk about this in any of you are in my business, online MBA program that I teach. I love WhatsApp as a communication tool. So they built this communication tool. Next thing you know, I don't know, a couple 100 million people are using it. I think it's $1 a user a year. And they sell that thing to Facebook for whatever, 17, 18, 19 billion dollars. Remember the saying? The saying was true there. Polemos, panton. The war, the conflict, the aggression that happened to Brian Acton that got him fired, that caused him to go and do what? It became the potent source of ideas, inventions for him. And somebody wired him and his partner, I think whatever percent they own, probably wired him. It's a nice wire to get in your bank account. $6 billion I calculated they probably had wired into their account. I don't know if it was all cash, might have been in stock, but a couple $1 billion. Imagine, going to your bank account and that thing literally overnight. For those of you who have never gotten a big wire, some of you have. It's pretty cool to see. Bank account just go, and I've definitely never have seen $1 billion wired into my account, but most people shy away from the conflict. What I like about that tweet that Brian Acton did was like, he wasn't shying away. He wasn't like good or bad. Oh, I got fired. Most people perceive being fired that conflict, because there's definitely a conflict that happens when you're fired or rejected, or a business partnership that collapses. But if you read the consistent pattern of the world's smartest people, and if you know this book of the day, this reason I'm doing this video, and what I talk about is if you can download the consciousness, the mindset of the world's sharpest people, you will benefit and reap the same rewards that they reap. Think about Donald Trump, this book that I said talk about this last time. I don't know why it's still up here, but he said at one point, the conflict of life, the economy turned around. That's war. That's war against you as a businessman. The recession hits, the world's gone to war with you, not overtly and not directly, but the implications are like a war on your bank account. And Trump says, I'm walking by a homeless guy and I'm $9.2 billion in debt. $1 billion he had personally guaranteed. So it wasn't just business debt he could go use bankruptcy to get away from. But you know what? What did he do? It became the potent source of ideas. The potent source of ideas, inventions, institutions, and states. That's what happened for Donald Trump. He built an empire. He said, I learned from that in the 80s that I never went backwards and got unfocused. He said in the 80s he was just building and building and building and building, and he was losing money. He was making money because the economy was on the uptick. And like Warren Buffett says, though, when the tide comes in, you see who's swimming naked. So the tide of life has an effect on allowing you to see where you're naked, quote unquote. And for Donald Trump, he discovered that in the 80s, late 80s, I think early 90s, when that economy changed. And he went from everything he touched went to gold to I'm $9.2 billion in debt. That's a significant number. That's $9,200 million in debt. $1,000 million personally liable for. Imagine that little number. We talked about a wire into your bank account. Imagine $1,000 million. That means you make $1 million to pay off your debt, and you still have $999,000 999 left to pay off units of $1 million. But Donald Trump understands this. And I want you to remember those three words: Polemos, Potter, Panton. The wars, quote unquote, against you and your happiness, against your physical health, against your bank account, against your love and friendship life, social life, against your fulfillment and happiness, these should become the potent source of ideas. So the way you and I should have been taught from childhood is to embrace these. These are life, my friend. Like Durant says, Mother Nature has not read the Declaration of Independence. Mother Nature never read that we are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Nature, the natural systems out there, and some of those are economic and some of those are biological, they don't care about you and I. So you have a choice. You can be a victim or you can say, Polemos, Potter, Panton. I hope that you'll say that. To the extent that you say that, you have the effect that Donald Trump had. In this Jeff Bezos book, let's see if I can find this chapter. He talks about, he got falsely accused of insider trading at one point. Let's see if I can find this here. I like to use my little, by the way, if you can use iBooks, I like to have a physical book, and then I also buy these iBooks because then I like to read on a physical, but I like to look up and quote and highlight things. And so I've done it here. Let's see. Scars. I'm just looking up the word scars because I remember that sentence. And I can, let's see. So Bezos, he was accused of insider trading. And listen to what the author says. It's on page 4. It's Milli Ravi is the name of it. He says, talking about Jeff Bezos, I don't care who you are or how much chutzpah you have. It's not fun picking up the Times and seeing your picture above the fold accused of insider trading. And then he says, we are all products of what we've been through. This is one of the things that made Jeff the person he is. The scar did not heal easily. So when you see Amazon.com, this dominant force in the world, it's a true force to be reckoned with. Not only in business, but in its implications for how we buy things, how we exchange things. This came out of tremendous scars, tremendous war that Bezos felt, tremendous conflict. Now, again, remember what I said at the beginning. There's people who listen to this and say, Ty, I don't want to embrace a world that's like that. Well, what I believe is what Jeff Bezos, they said about Bezos. He was willing to embrace the truth, whether or not it was that jolly of a truth. And I think for you and I, instead of being set in the end game, set in how we want the world to work, it's better to pick an end game and then conform to the rules that Mother Nature's laid down. It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen anyway. So what does this mean practically to you? Well, let's take each of the 4 pillars. I'm all about the good life. So we got to get these 4 things right in order to live the life that basically humans are programmed to want to achieve, right? The quote-unquote good life. So number 1, we have health. So in the world that you live in now, make no mistake, the powers that be, and I don't mean this in some weird conspiracy theory. I don't think there is a conspiracy against your health. I think it's a natural outgrowth of a free market economic system where people are seeking their own interests. McDonald's, Nabisco, R.J. Reynolds, they're going to manufacture food that they believe gets the highest ROI, the return on investment for their set of shareholders, without realizing, because remember what war is. Let me read you this. People forget what war is, and this is relevant to you. We forget that it's not a conspiracy. It says the causes of war are the same. This is Will Durant. The causes of war are the same as the causes of competition among individuals. Acquisitiveness, pugnacity, and pride, the desire for food, land, materials, fuel, and mastery. The state has our instincts without our restraints. And you could say the same about the corporation. The corporation has our instincts, desire for food, land, materials, fuel, and mastery, and it doesn't have our restraints per se, unless, there are ways that corporations are restrained. But in general, they are a reflection of us, right? So the causes of war against you are the same as the competition you might have in sports, or the competition you might have had, for example, maybe you're dating someone or married to somebody. Somebody else probably wanted to date them and marry them, and you won out that competition. It might not have been an overt competition, but make no mistake, to that other person who lost out on whoever you're dating or married, it feels competitive. You took something that they wanted at that moment in time, and when you had it, they couldn't have it. That's competition. Even a person not meaning to step on anyone's toes, you can't help but step on someone's toes. You're listening to this video or watching this audio podcast, and it's taking up resources of our planet. Okay? There's an interesting book called Tubes. It's about the amount of power that it takes for Google to run the search engines, or YouTube. It's taking tremendous resources, and resources, it's not a zero-sum game per se. I'm not a Malthusian, Malthusian theory in the 1800s said we're going to run out of food because the more people that have kids, the more food there is, the more people have kids, and eventually and there's some truth to that, but he's been basically proven wrong because humans have ingenuity. But in the sense that there is somewhat of a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be that way at every point. World War II started for many reasons, probably. I'm not going to purport to tell you exactly why. I do and have read quite a bit of history, friends with some famous historians, and Germany, whether it be World War I or World War II, was expansionary, meaning they were like, we want some of what France and Germany fought over this one area on the border there. Germany, Poland, same thing. Japan, why did they drop a bomb? Why did they attack the U.S. In Pearl Harbor? It wasn't for fun. It was they wanted to strike first, knock out our Navy, because they wanted what Will Durant says is the cause of all war. They were acquisitive, they had pugnacity, they had national pride. They had the desire for food, land, and materials. They wanted the timber of Southeast Asia, of the resources, rubber, oil, whatever it might have been. They made all the way down to New Zealand and Australia. Japan's a small place. They're like, hey, why did these people get it and why can't we have it? And that's a microcosm. Although you may have not been in war, that's a microcosm of your life. The job that you work at, or if you're self-employed, people have resources. In the modern world, we call that cash, money, and they have it in their bank account. And at some level, you've got to convince them to put it in your bank account, because if you do not have enough of that, your life quality will be degraded. In some cases, you'll die, right? So going back to this health, there's corporations. Let's take McDonald's, fast food, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't want to pick on McDonald's per se. Anybody, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. They do not care about the longevity and the health and your health. They don't. In a sense, you're in conflict. If they can make something sweet enough and you drink it, they're going to get what they can get. If they can get you to give $1, Joel Salchin used to tell me, he said, Ty, people come to this farm, I grow the best eggs in the world. These are from healthy chickens eating organic grain and out, pasture eating grass and bugs, all those things that he says, he calls it the chickenness of a chicken, right? The natural state. And he says, I have these dozen eggs, and I charge whatever, $3. He was charging a dozen back then. And he said people come to the farm and complain, why are these eggs $3? And he said they're holding a can of Coca-Cola. Basically, it's water and sugar or Sprite or whatever. And he said one egg that I'm selling them has more nutrients than a whole 6-pack or whatever of Coke. I don't remember what he said. That was something like that, right? He's right. Like the egg, we miscalculate in that case. So that one egg, which if you get a dozen eggs for $1, let's say, or $3, let's say each egg is 25 cents, roughly, right? So a can of Coca-Cola, they've used, if you read this book, where is it? There it is, Salt, Sugar, Fat. Michael Moss, the Pulitzer Prize winning author, talks about how the food companies literally have scientists sitting in a lab like mad scientists designing the mouthfeel, designing the exact level of sugar, tart, saltiness, all these various flavors that they have. And they are deciding precisely not around health, not around your longevity, but around if they put 4 different versions of their soda on the shelf, which one gets the most sales, right? They're appealing to the lowest common denominator. So what you could say, all right, is that they are at war with your best interests. Now, you can be a victim, and that's what most people are. 60% of people in the United States are overweight or obese, right? 60%. I think it's even climbing higher, so 70, 75%. I read somewhere that by 2020 or 25, 50% of children will be either diabetic or pre-diabetic. It's a crazy thing. Like, not only is society going to war on adults, but we're going to, I often wonder, what are the implications for society that profits through, I'm not going to say unethical, but basically going to war on the health of their own children? There has to be some severe repercussions in the long term for society. But that's the society we live in, and you can lament that, and there's many good things in the modern world, more good things than bad. But you as an individual, you listening to me here as I kind of babble about various topics, you have to go, instead of seeing yourself as a victim, you have to go, Polemos, pater, panton. The war on my body and my health will become the potent source of ideas, inventions for me. How can you spin it around? Well, I have some friends. They've turned the whole health crisis into a business online where they're teaching people how to be healthy, lose weight. They're making a couple $100,000 a day. Down here in Santa Monica, down the street, there's a guy, few people, started P90X. I think they did $600 million. And they're getting people healthy. It's the greatest business ever. You're shipping CDs out of how to do sit-ups and push-ups and stretch, all these things that are good for civilization, and the world's rewarded you with $600 million. So if you can't beat the corporations, join them. Just do what they're doing, but instead of making war on the health of people, make war on the institutions that are causing the problem to start with. P90X, $600 million. They've gotten rich doing something that gets the same end game as the companies selling soda sugar water. The companies selling, crappy fried junk food. You see, this is, instead of you lamenting your life and lamenting the world and go to war. Use war as the potent source of things that are new. It's a new approach to life. There's no victimhood here. Why be a victim? I mean, you could be a victim. We're all moving through time on a daily basis towards an end. We probably know what that outcome is. We all seem to get older. Like Charles Barkley, the great NBA Hall of Fame player, says, Father Time's undefeated in the basketball game of life. So you're moving forward. You can move forward as a victim, or you can move forward as a potent source of new ideas. Business, money, the recession, the depression, the coming problems that you read about. Yeah, but you can also see those as Donald Trump saw them. The recession took him out of the game, $9.2 billion out of the game. But guess what? Guess who's one of the richest men in the world today? Donald Trump, $4 billion net worth. And all along the way, he came through it. He lived fine. He saw it as a potent source of inspiration. He said, I learned to focus on my business. I learned how to build out the brands better. I learned how to expand into golf courses and this. And I learned what not to do. He pulled it off. You must be somebody who pulls it off. Let's think about love life. I mean, yeah, 50% of people get divorced in the world. Yes, there's tremendous, transitory relationships, and people feel lonely in the world, and you don't have enough friends, and you don't have enough deep friends, and people lament this. It's war on your social life. But remember, as we said, Polemos, pater, panton. That strife, that stress, you should be excited about. I love this saying that Tony Robbins really helped me. I've always been indebted to Tony Robbins' stuff. I read once in a book when I remember I had no money. I was sleeping on my mom's couch. Some of you have heard the story. I had no college degree. I had some farm skills. I knew how to milk cows. Wasn't going to help me in the modern world. Didn't have a girlfriend. I had this old beat up car that had a hole in literally the floor. So if you put your foot where you're driving, you could accidentally miss the gas pedal and put your foot through the floor and get your foot chopped off. I didn't have a girlfriend. Embarrassed to pick up any girl in this car. It's two different colors, 20-year-old car. And I picked up that Tony Robbins book, and I remember this one line. He said, "When you succeed, you party, but when you fail, you ponder. And all great things come from pondering." That's the same thing. The war, the strife, out of it comes great things. I don't want to be political. World War II, out of that conflict, what happened? The American baby boomer, the rise of the American economy. Japan after World War II, it's now grown, allied with the United States in some, got its act together in terms of, recovering from this great war that had happened to them. And it's grown into, it's a potent source of new ideas and invention, and it grew into something that's given us many good things. Germany, out of a war. Now, again, I'm not advocating war. This conversation, I know someone's going to misunderstand it and be like, "Oh, Ty's a warmonger." I'm not. I'm not that political. So I try to be like Jeff Bezos. It's like the only thing I know for sure is maybe some laws of physics. I know if I jump off my balcony here, I live in the Hollywood Hills, it's 80 feet down. I know I'm probably not going to like the end game of hitting the bottom. But besides that, I don't know. I can't tell you. I like that famous historian who 20 years ago was asked what the repercussions of the French Revolution were, which of course happened hundreds of years before. And he said, "I don't know. It's too early to tell." It's very hard to tell. What we do know is there's a consistent pattern that out of conflict, out of things not going your way, if you're like Tony Robbins and you get excited and you don't go into victimhood and retreat, it's the father and the source of those potent ideas that will drive you forward towards your goal. If you're lonely, take it as a time to take a whole bunch of public speaking classes at Toastmasters, or to go on an online dating site and go on 50 dates and say, "I'm going to write a book about the 50 dates that I went on." I had sometimes people hire me, people ask me to consult for their business, so I don't always have time. But there was a lady here, and she was single, and a few years ago, she paid me. She came in for 30 minutes and sat at my table here, kitchen table, and I gave her some ideas about her business. She's going to be on the Today Show or something like that. And she said, she was completely lonely, completely single, divorced, I think, and older. She felt like, man, I've missed the boat here. And instead of being a victim, she said, this conflict against me, this stress against me, feeling lonely, I'm going to go out. And she wrote a book about how she learned to use online dating. I think she said Match.com, and she married the guy. She brought her with her. She was happily married. And she turned it into a business. She made her mess her message. I love that saying, right? You make your mess your message. So I want you, along with me, I'm doing it at the same time, to think deeply. It's like, where have I gotten tricked into thinking an argument with a person where they walk away angry and I walk away angry is bad? Who says it's bad? Everything's up on the table for discussion. We're in the modern world. We don't live 500 years ago where you get put to the stake for saying that the planet is Earth is the center of the universe. We don't live in those times. I hope you're not back in those times. I hope I don't regress, but I unknowingly regress to that type of thinking. So let's say you've been in a big argument. Let's say you're divorced. Let's say you lost a friend. Who's to say that out of that war, that conflict, won't come the greatest potent source of inspiration? Remember I said adopted children, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Oprah Winfrey had tremendous trauma. I think she was raped when she was a child or abused in some ways. Look at what it became, a wellspring of a potent source of her saying, "I'm going to give, family, whatever, coaching, whatever her show was about, right? Helping people get answers." It's done pretty good for her. It's like I saw this Bill Gates talk, and he said, sometimes I like to imagine that the world just exists for me. And if it does, it's going pretty well for me. I thought that was a funny glimpse into the mind of Bill Gates. But think about Oprah Winfrey. It's like she seems to be doing okay. She seems to have recovered. The human organism, we're pretty darn resilient. If you trace our DNA, we all go back to about 10,000 people. 10,000 people we're all pretty related. And we are a resilient creature. Now, I read cockroaches, by the way, are more resilient than us. There'll be nuclear bombs. There'll still be cockroaches running everywhere. Not sure what that implications means about you and I, but besides cockroaches, we seem to be doing pretty damn well. But we can do better. And you as an individual, I'm talking about as a group of people, as a civilization. But that's not to say that there's losers if your end game is fulfillment, the good life, there's many losers in that. More losers than winners. It's like Hawking says, if you shake the puzzle box, you got a jigsaw puzzle, and you shake that, you know what? Out of that sometimes, most of the time, comes chaos. There's very few times you take a jigsaw puzzle. You take the pieces randomly. You throw them in the box. You shake the box. You open it, and magically, it's all put together. It never happens that way. In fact, although I should not say the word never, theoretically, if you shake it trillion times, a billion times, depending on how many pieces are in the various combinations, it would eventually come together, but it's a bad hand of poker to play with your life. No, you have to be systematic about your life. You have to open the pieces, think logically, put them together, use feedback that didn't work, boom, 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 and put together the puzzle of life. And one of those methodologies is that's going to allow you to put together the piece is flipping around how you understand conflict. Because if you come from a place where you perceive, I want to move away from all conflict, ooh, that person's arguing with me, oh, that person makes me feel bad, oh, if I don't eat that hamburger, I really feel hungry. That's a source of conflict between your body not understanding that this is refined, processed food. If you can't move away from that and embrace the conflict and say, no, this is life. I'm a human. And the end game from a certain level of conflict is going to be what I want, then embrace it. Just say to yourself over and over, Polemos, Potter, Panton. Now, I want to give a caveat. I'm not suggesting that you become the most argumentative person in the world, or you seek to get divorced or something. Don't misinterpret. Life is going to send enough conflict on its own. You probably don't have to exacerbate it by being a crazy person. I'm saying when those things come that are outside of your control, it's a little bit like Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know that I always agree with that. It's not always true. You can get to a level of stress that is above and beyond what you can handle, and then it literally makes you weaker. It doesn't make you stronger. I know what Nietzsche was trying to say, or I think I understand what he's trying to say. What I'm saying is something completely different. I'm not saying what doesn't kill you makes you strong. I'm saying that stress is in part a subjective experience. For example, Alan Nation used to tell me, Ty, he said, if you want to plan your life, the Air Force teaches its pilots, while those pilots are preparing to fly, it teaches them one simple thing. It says, you must make 3 plans in your head. Best case scenario, that everything goes good, you're flying your plane, and you land back on the aircraft carrier, no problems. That's the best case scenario. You must plan for the worst case scenario, which is like you're flying and all of a sudden the engines go out. And what's your plan ahead of time? Press the parachute, the ejection button. And what's the most likely? Well, you're going to be up there and a few little problems happen, but you can get back to the aircraft carrier. So you make a plan for that. The reason that works so well is it lowers your stress. Once you've expected the worst, the best, and the most likely, The subjective stress is removed and you're only left with the real stress. So much of the reason that you and I feel conflict and stress is because we have been falsely taught, falsely trained ourselves both by others and by Hollywood fairy tales that life is just you're supposed to fly your airplane, and if an engine goes bad, it's a calamity. But once you understand that every certain amount of hours you fly, an engine's going to go out, you build it into your mentality, your subjective experience is expecting that, then the cortisol levels don't spike through the roof. It's unexpected things that make you crazy. So part of this conversation I'm having with you is to say, hey, expect it. It's coming. And it doesn't have to be such a bad experience. You can make it worse than it really is. You know, I saw a talk by not Seth Rogen, but Jonah Hill. If you saw him in the new, what is that? Wolf of Wall Street, right? Jonah Hill. It was with DiCaprio. And Jonah Hill said, I read an interview in like Esquire or GQ, and they said, what have you learned about life? And he's like, he learned, don't stress out so much because things usually naturally work themselves out, you know? You ever been dating someone and then you break up with them and you're like freaked out? You're like, I'll never meet someone again. Or you get fired from a job like Brian Acton. And most of us, myself included, we're not as cool under pressure as Brian Acton was. He was like, hey, something's going to come out of this. It's going to be a potent source of invention. He was right. You got, made $19 billion in the sale of his company. But you're dating someone or something, or you get fired and you're like, there'll never be something better. Jonah Hill's like, I've learned as I got older that there's a cycle to life and things come around, that there's a winter where it's dark and cold, but for every winter, you usually get a spring. It usually revolves around. So don't freak out so much. That was his advice. I read that about 6 months ago, and I was like, that's, I don't always look to actors for my advice, but I was like, let me test that in my life. So I had some big business things that I had to deal with that were stressful. And I'm like, let me just take the perspective that it's gonna freaking pan out. And because I'm a social person and you're a social person and you're dealing with other humans, and we are all resilient machines made to survive, you usually work it out. It's very rare that during a divorce or that during a breakup with somebody or losing a friend or that it's irreparable. It's only, you can't repair it when you freak out to the extent that you make it unfixable. So relax is the lesson that I've been repeating to myself. And then when I stumbled across this, I'm like, yes, I love this. This Heraclides guy was a smart guy. Competition is the father of all. And let me say, remember what Durant says. He says peace is an unstable equilibrium. Now, those of you who know, I'm a big believer in like what Richard Dawkins talks about. Not just he but a lot of biologists talk about, which is ESS, evolutionary stable systems, right? So in order to have stability, which is what you want out of life, there's no good or bad. It's like there's no good or bad about a friendship you have working out or leaving that friendship. You don't have to see yourself as a failure if you leave that friendship or that marriage or whatever it might be, or that business. It's more, is it stable? And what Durant says is peace. Everything going well is an unstable equilibrium, meaning it's a violation of the ESS. I'm going to tell you a story. It's a little interesting one. Back when I was on a farm, and if you've never seen the TED Talk, there's a guy named Alan Savory. He's kind of trying to revolutionize the world in terms of the degradation and the destruction of soil, which is really, if you really want to talk about a big problem that's happening in the world, if you destroy the soil, the fertility of the soil washes off into the ocean and we lose the best topsoil in the world, you and I are going to be pretty hungry pretty quick. I don't care where you live in the world. So this guy, Alan Savory, developed this system, HRM, changing ranch land, forest land, and he went to Africa, and there's a cool TED Talk that he does. I learned about him through Joel Salatin. Here's something interesting. So you have cows in the United States, buffalo, ancient, in Africa you have the wildebeest and antelopes and so on. So then you have lions. In the U.S. you had predators like mountain lions, wolves, so on. So these buffalo would normally spread out very far, right? There'd be no reason to be very close together. But buffalo go really close together when they eat grass. Why? Because of the predators, the quote unquote bad guys. But there is no good or bad in biology, right? You never say the wolf is bad, the lion's bad for eating the antelope. No, it's a stable system. Let's understand that stable system because it pertains to your life. You got the buffalo, they stay close together. The wolves are there waiting, and because the wolves are waiting, the buffalo kind of stay close for protection. Now, let me tell you why that's an equilibrium. It's equilibrium because the process of the cows being very close together, they have sharp hooves. Their feet have these sharp hooves. It chips up the ground. So the cows come, the buffaloes come, they eat the grass, they chip up the soil, and then the grass is all done because they ate it. They stayed close together, they destroyed it. Then they move on, and they might not come back for like 1 year. It's called rotational grazing. It happens in nature. Well, when we killed off all the predators, the wolves, guess what happened? The buffalo no longer got together in tight circles and tight groups and no longer chipped up the soil. They spread out because there was no predators. We disrupted this stable system. And now the soil began to break down because the action of the hooves had aerated that soil. So you see, when you think black and white, like predators are bad, bad things are bad, and you get rid of them, you violate a tenet of biology, which is that peace is an unstable equilibrium. We have this world where we think things going well in our life is a stable equilibrium. In fact, that's why most people want stability. I want peace because they equate it with stability, and they want stability because they equate it with peace. But what if, like Jeff Bezos, we throw that ideology out the window and we go, no, you need the predators out there, the coyotes and the wolves, because they keep the pack together. Now, I'm not suggesting that in the modern world crime is good, because crime is a horrible thing, especially if it happens to you. I'm not talking about that extreme. I'm talking about a general principle, that the stresses of life that come upon you, if they were to be removed, you wouldn't get the results you wanted. You would not get the results you wanted. I was in New Zealand. I was just a teenager, I think, or 20 years old. And I was on this farm. It's a famous farm, Lochinvar Farm. It's one of the biggest farms in the world. And I was driving around with the owner of the farm. And he said, see that guy mowing my grass? And there was just a guy mowing his front yard grass in a little riding lawnmower. I said, yeah. You know what's interesting about that guy? I said, what? He said, that guy won the lottery here in New Zealand. And won, like, I think $18 million. I said, oh, what's interesting about that? He said, why do you think he's mowing my grass for minimum wage? It's like, I don't know. And he said, Ty, once that guy won $18 million, his life became so stable that he was bored out of his mind. He didn't know, for the first year he did all this stuff. Eventually, having no potential conflict, he just was like, hey, can I mow your grass? I need something to do. You'd be surprised. Look at kids who inherit money. There's no worse mess. I want to use a different word, but I'll keep this a family show. There's no worse screw-ups in life than the majority of people who inherit their money. They don't have the necessary conflict. If this is true, that, that war and conflict is the father of all innovation, the father of all growth, then removing that is death. It's like the removal of life. On some level, when you take little babies, and this can be, you gotta be careful not to do this extreme, but where they grow them up in too sanitary of an environment, they don't have the exposure to germs, they never develop the antibodies that you need. Think of it that way, antibodies. Those are somewhat of conflicts. Interesting enough, one of the biggest problems in life, my grandma still has one of these polio vaccines and tuberculosis and all this. How did they get rid of polio? Jonas Salk came up, with this vaccine. And the concept of vaccine is so counterintuitive. It's like, let's take the disease and put it into somebody. Let's inject. It's like war. It's like, let's make war on this person's body with a little bit of polio. But then what's the solution? What does that do? The body builds up antibodies. It's the source of the solution, of the cure. Now, by the way, I don't want to get into the whole, I know there's this huge debate whether vaccines are good or not. I don't want to get into that. I don't know. I know nothing about it. Please don't comment about the vaccine thing. Listen to the principle. The principle. The principle is the injection of some stress. Again, it can be taken to extreme. If you inject too much polio into somebody, they would get polio and die. So I'm not suggesting that you want a life that's overboard. No, what we want, I've talked about this over and over. Aristotle speaks of the goal, the mean, the average. You want the in-between. I'm just having this conversation because we've been taught that over here, the peaceful way, no conflict. You getting along with everybody, everybody getting along with you, your bank money just flowing into your bank account perfectly, your body just, that this and out of this will come what you want. I'm saying it's not. I'm saying it's not. I'm saying you should not be afraid to go to war against those things. We talked about junk food. We talked about, if the economy goes bad, you must be aggressive to get out of it. But don't freak out. And that's the main point of this whole talk. Remember what Jonah Hill said. You'd be surprised how things will work their way out. So be cool under pressure. Let me read you this about Jeff Bezos. I thought this was great. I write, by the way, if you look here, for watching this as a video, not audio, I like to write in the back of the book. And I put little stars and stuff. Let me see if I can find this. Talking about how, I will look on my phone here. Jeff Bezos was incredibly cool under pressure. Right? My question is, how cool are you under pressure? Let's see if I can find this. .ad. I'll find it later. It's somewhere here in the book. Point being, here's something that's interesting. On page 232 of the book, he says, this isn't exactly what I was looking for, but it's an interesting point. It says on page 232, it was talking about Jeff Bezos' understanding of stress and long-term and short-term. He says, because Jeff is not deterred by short-term setbacks. He said, it turned out that most of the things I predict... Oh, yeah, this is relevant. Sorry. Jeff Wilke, one of his right-hand men, was telling him when they were building the Kindle that all this stuff was going to go wrong with it. And he said, I thought it would be difficult and disruptive, and I was skeptical that it was the right use of our business resources. And then Wilke says, it turned out that most of the things I predicted would go wrong actually happened. Like I told Jeff Bezos, this is going to go wrong, and Jeff Bezos did it anyway. But he said about Jeff Bezos, and we still powered through it because Jeff is not deterred by short-term setbacks. Like, Jeff's a warrior. Warriors expect some things to hit him between the eyes. And so it's pretty, if you read this book, you'll see this. It's Jeff Bezos was no stranger at all to conflict. In fact, he might have been a little extreme. Page 196 here, let me read you this fascinating thing about him. And this is going back to what I said of conflict and war being the potent source of invention. So Amazon at this point was losing money, all right? And Google was coming and taking their employees. And this was what Bezos said. Jeff Bezos, or they said about him. Jeff Bezos simply refused to accept Amazon's fate as an unexciting and marginally profitable online retailer. Now listen to these words. There is only one way out of this predicament, he said repeatedly to employees during this time. And that is to invent our way out. Invent our way out. Now going back to what I said, Will Durant. What did Will Durant say? It's a potent source of invention. So I want you to become an inventor. I want you to become a mad scientist in life. I would like to be a mad scientist in life that understands that the wars and the conflicts come, that understands that these make me a better inventor. And that when I look back, if your goal is the good life, one of the things that brings you the good life is going through trial and adversity. And if you can do it, by the way, Jonathan Haidt, the happiness hypothesis author and the NYU professor, he told me, he said, Ty, companionative love, doing it with somebody, because humans are hive, pack animals, so to speak. He said if you can do it with somebody and you can face the war, you create tremendous brotherhood or sisterhood, tremendous memory happiness. The Nobel Prize winning, I think, Kahneman talks about the level. There's two types of happiness. There's momentary happiness, right? But then he also says there's memory happiness. So being able to go through these conflicts, these wars, like Jeff Bezos said, invent your way through, will give you a tremendous sense of this. Especially if you're doing it with some people by your side, going through this conflict we call life, will give you tremendous upside dopamine release in your brain. You'll get the happiness hormones rushing through your body as you have this memory happiness of, I made it through. You don't want to be the rich kid who just inherited their money and has no conflict. There's nothing there for you. There's no end game. Always work with an end game. Remember, be a truth seeker. Now, my question to you, because I like this feedback. I'm getting a lot of comments. It's crazy, and I thank you for this. You can do it on Twitter at Ty Lopez, or on my YouTube here, or as a podcast review. By the way, I like when podcasts are stupid because there's no way to do a back and forth reply. So just use the little review thing. It also helps me if you give me a review, but mostly I don't really care that much about that. I'm doing this for free. It's not like a podcast is free, so I don't care if I get more people following it, really. But leave it as a review, your thought on the podcast, and then I can see it. And if I tell me your name or whatever, and I'll try to write you back if you email me also. So here's the question for you, feedback. Think of a specific area that you perceived as an absolute nightmare, that you would have been better off going Polemos, patter, panton. This competition, this stress is going to be the potent source of invention. So think of an example where you didn't do it. I can think of a few business ones. Some of them are confidential. I don't want to bring up. But like Jonah Hill said, I freaked out and was like, this is the end of the world. And then looking back now, it not only worked out okay, but I invented my way out of it. It forced me to get better at other things I was doing in business. So it was like I was going to lose income because this business wasn't working, and I was freaked out, and and then I invented my way out of it. It was the potent source of invention for me. And that now is my new guide. So what's yours? Maybe it's a breakup with somebody. Maybe it's gaining a ton of weight. You gain 500 pounds, you gain 300 pounds, and then you realize, I'm going to go to war back on this. I'm going to invent my way. I'm going to start a new P90X company. Invent your way out of that conflict instead of shrinking from it and being freaked out. And remember, instead of seeking that unstable equilibrium in life. So let's think about one. Write it out. Don't be afraid to put some details. I know I didn't give details on mine, and that's just because it's legally confidential between it wasn't a big deal, actually, but it turned out to be an amazing deal, by the way, for everybody involved. It was a win-win in the end. But at that moment in time when it was unstable, I'm like, oh man, this business is not going to work, right? And I've learned that it was fine. So what's yours? How about a breakup with somebody? You were like, I will never meet a person of this quality. Then 6 months later, you meet someone way more compatible with you. Write it out, because it'll help you to write something on this page as a comment, because then you can refer back to it and be like, what was the outcome in reality? So write this out too. So write out the specific incident, write out what you thought was going to happen, and then write out what actually happened. You can tweet it to me at Ty Lopez. I'm on Instagram, Ty Lopez1. By the way, for those of you who aren't on my book of the day, it's free. I write an email newsletter. I think now it's the largest book club in the world, online, email newsletter. Oprah's, it's bigger, but besides that online one, it's I think the largest now. So join that. It's free. You just go to tylopez.com, my website. It's a little link at the top. Enter it, and I'll send you. I'm also, by the way, this 67 steps. I'll send you this 67 steps. That's going to eventually run out because I'm actually shipping people a book. So if you're listening to this late recorded, it might be gone off my site. But if not, check out the 67 steps. It's one of the best things, I'm the most proud of it. It's 67 days, one video a day, one audio or video a day for 67 days. And it's basically insight into the compilation of every great thinker I've ever read, learned from, and put into one system. 67 days to change your life. University College London found it takes 66 days to form a new habit, to really change your life. There's no overnight success, but 66 days, give me 66 days. So that's on my site too. So you put in the book of the day and you can click on the 67 steps thing. I've been giving out a free book. I lose money every time you do it, but there's more to life than money. I want this message to spread. It's not a book that I wrote, by the way. It's a book, one of my favorite books. And so you can get the online login and the book. You just pay for the shipping. It's a couple bucks, and I cover the book and everything. So I don't make any money, by the way. That goes to FedEx or whatever to send you the book. But if not, even if you don't want to do the 67 steps, start with the book of the day. Look, take action. Bias towards action. We're going to talk about that on the next session or one of these next ones. For now, just remember and memorize that Polemos, potter, panton, war, competition, stress is the father of all things, the potent source of ideas, inventions, institutions, and states. And just say to yourself, peace is unstable. It's an unstable equilibrium. The world needs, like I said, the wolves make the whole biological system work. They keep the cows together, which keeps the soil working, which keeps the grass growing, so everybody lives. There needs to be a little conflict in your life. You don't want it too extreme, and you don't want too little, right? You don't want to constantly be stressed. But some of your stress is going to drop if you take these principles from these great thinkers. And I'm not the great thinker here, by the way. Don't see myself as some guru. I'm passing on to you, from these books, from these people who have gone far and above anything I've ever accomplished. Listen to them. Listen to this again as I pass on their words through me to you. Let your stress be lowered by doing what the Air Force does. Make a plan for the worst, make a plan for the best, and the most likely. Then you're good. You're settled no matter what happens. All right. Thank you so much. Check out tylopez.com. Leave me a comment, review, and stay tuned for the next one. Oh, and by the way, check out 67 Steps. I like it. Getting huge feedback from it. So anyway, talk to you soon.